The dominoes begin to fall as Alexander Mattison is released by the Vikings. We'll talk about what this means and everything else going on at the Combine here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate y'all so very much. If you are new here, hello and welcome. This is a show you can find anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is an audio listening app like the SiriusXM app, which, by the way, you can search out any sports team and find hometown broadcasts of that team. Like you can search out Timberwolves and find a hometown radio broadcast right there on the SiriusXM app. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today on the show, we have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. But the first thing is, you are probably already aware of it. If not, breaking news, Alexander Mattison released by the Vikings. This is a very funny thing to happen after what I did yesterday, which is the blow it all up offseason, where I actually had to re-record a part because I was like, oh, of course you'll cut all the veterans. Mattison's one of those. And then looking at his contract and realizing, oh, dead cap wise, that actually didn't trigger by the rules. So I had to trade him. I'm going to guess the Vikings probably asked around to see if they could get anything in a trade for Alexander Mattison, but alas, no dice. He will instead be released. However, my understanding of his contract was wrong, so let me update that for you. And I was not alone. Actually, both of the major cap websites, SpotRack and Over the Cap, had different information, and it was clarified on Thursday by Ben Gessling, who confirmed via his contract sources that $2.75 million of Alexander Mattison's contract was vested guarantees, not full guarantees. Vested guarantees meant it will be fully guaranteed as of March 15th, which you will notice if you have a calendar near you. It is not that day yet. So so that money is not guaranteed. Essentially, it's we can cut you as a cap casualty, but once you get into camp, you're not going to have to worry on roster cutdown day. That's kind of what those guarantees are basically meant to be. So that means that the Vikings save about $3.33 million, 3.35 to be exact, if you're nickel and diming it at home. And Alexander Mattison becomes a free agent. It's kind of funny, cutting Alexander Mattison, again, it's like instinctually you understand it, right? It is, he lost his job twice in one season. He lost his job to Cam Akers got hurt, and then he lost his job to Ty Chandler. Or he was in the process of losing his job to Cam Akers. Cam Akers was getting more and more of the workload every single week, and then he got hurt, and then Ty Chandler had completely taken over as the starter by the end of the season. So it was very clear that the Vikings were not satisfied with Alexander Mattison. Personally, I looked at the way Ty Chandler played, and I kind of just saw a whole bunch of different problems, and I'm not happy enough with that running back room at all. If it were up to me, I think that room needs an infusion of serious talent. Whether that is going out and finding one of these, there's a million free agent running backs out there that are actually pretty exciting. And we just kind of have to see which one of them actually does hit free agency, whether it's Saquon Barkley. I think there's a rumor out there it was reported that Josh Jacobs is going to test free agency, but a return to the Raiders is not out of the question. I think it's kind of the same deal with Barkley and Tony Pollard. There's Derrick Henry out there if you're interested in getting someone with a little more tread on their tires, and maybe you get Derrick Henry a little bit cheaper because of how old he is. There are a lot of names out there that are, guys you had in the first round of your fantasy drafts at some point in their career. And it's a matter of seeing if they can continue that success and what kind of price point and all that stuff. It's a very robust market, which means this like super sucks for Alexander Mattison. And I do want to take a minute to just appreciate Mattison, the person. I was pretty critical of him basically the entire time he was here, because when he got drafted, he was a 3rd round pick, and I didn't like it mostly because I didn't like picking a running back that was probably going to be a backup for most of his time here, which he was. And when he did get a chance to start, he didn't live up to that. I don't quite think that paid off on a 3rd round pick, but that's not a problem with Mattison necessarily. It's more of a problem with Rick Spielman for me. Mattison himself was a consummate professional at every single turn. He was a phenomenal teammate, a phenomenal member of the community. And as a person, as a workhorse, that's not a place where you can have complaints. And something that bugs me a little bit when we get to this time of year, we get to the cap casualty time of year, which I don't think is going to be very severe for the Vikings, because they already have a lot of cap and they don't really have a lot of contracts that are smart to, I mean, there's a lot expiring, maybe guys walk, but it's not like they need to cut guys to save money. But you see it with other teams that are doing that. And especially if it's someone like Mattison, who, I mean, it's not like he was a superstar, right? He got benched twice, or at least partially benched, I guess I'll call it. But people were like dancing on his grave, man. Some of the reactions that I saw to the news on social media are, I don't think, acceptable. I don't know. I mean, some of it's kids, and kids are going to do what kids are going to do, but like, I don't know. The dude's like, got a long way to fight back into getting a chance to at a starting job. He basically has to wait for the running back market, which honestly, I mean, if we're going to look at it like the way it played out last year with Dalvin Cook, a lot of these guys might not get signed for like a while. These might not be players. I mean, maybe like Barkley and Josh Jacobs and whoever doesn't get tagged there, but there's going to be probably a Pro Bowler on the market beyond the draft. And Mattison's probably going to have to wait for all that stuff to clear out before he kind of gets his bite at the apple, unless he's willing to just take like a veteran minimum prove it deal. But that sucks. Like, there's really hard for me to imagine a world where this next year doesn't really suck for Alexander Mattison. And I hate that for him, because I think he's a really great guy. That doesn't mean that I disagree with the move or anything. I actually super wholeheartedly agree with it, and I would have been advocating for it pretty strongly if I understood how the contract worked, but I didn't. But hey, now I do, and now you do too. And the Vikings are going to be out in that same running back market, right? I don't know if this is something you draft a guy for, right? The Vikings have bigger fish to fry with their top 100 picks. Of which they have, 2 in the top 100? Yeah, because the 4th round wouldn't be in the top 100. So that's 2 in the top 100. They're going to have to, I mean, looking at quarterback, they're looking at edge rusher. That was actually one of the rumors coming out of the combine, was the Vikings are really into edge rushers, which, like, of course they are. Have you seen the state of that room? They also, I'm going to talk maybe next week, if we don't get news, talk about where they're at with Danielle Hunter, at least where it's reported that they're at with Danielle Hunter. But if you listen to Access Vikings, which is Ben Gessling and Andrew Kramer, it's a Star Tribune podcast, they don't seem particularly sold on Danielle Hunter coming back to the Vikings, because they don't think that the Vikings are as high on Danielle Hunter as they'd have to be to pay him, which I think is insane. I'm going to just put a pin in that for another day. But if he does indeed walk, that edge room is just like a full-on like break glass emergency situation. They don't have any players at all. I mean, that's DEFCON 1. That's that is the like get in the bunkers emergency, right, at that room. And edge rusher is a really important position. So that's a much bigger fish to fry. So I don't think that this is something you handle in the draft, unless Kwesi's just going to not learn anything from last year and just try to moneyball this again. Then, I don't know, pick your favorite Sun Belt Conference running back in the 5th round, and maybe that's the Vikings guy. But I do think they need like a bona fide starter that can be trusted, not a guy that's been a backup for his whole time in the NFL saying, are you ready to take the next step? I think it's time beyond that. Kevin O'Connell said some nice things about Ty Chandler. I personally think that it was a little tempered. I don't think you talk about Ty Chandler like you talk about a guy that you're just going to anoint with the starting job with no competition. I think someone has to get added to that room just for camp. They just don't literally have enough bodies, but I think someone serious is getting added to that room. Whether that's, something really cool and fun, like, oh my God, what if they went out and shelled out for Saquon Barkley? That would be fun. There's other priorities. Got to make sure we're not shirking those. But whether it's something like that or it's something perhaps a little more responsible, like I saw somebody suggest Zach Moss, something like that you're not breaking the bank and maybe it's like a committee deal. Like, I don't know what they do, but that room needs to be addressed. I do think the running back room was the single thing holding the run game back the most in 2023, which might be a hot take, but there was some bad running backs plays. And I think that room needs to be addressed. Now we're in the combine. We're deep in it. We got guys doing tests. I want to talk to you a little bit about or keep you updated on who some of the big combine risers are. And also just kind of keep checking out on that rumor mill, because this is the time of year. This is the place where it all comes out. So we got a lot to talk about. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, and it's America's #1 sports book for a reason. That's because they've got all kinds of really cool promos all the time. So go check out the FanDuel website or the FanDuel app. All over the place, you're going to have fun promos and suggested bets and stuff like that. But if you're new, you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And this is your thing. You get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So go put down $5 on anything you're super confident in. It can even be like a super heavy favorites money line, and you will get $150 back in bonus bets, assuming that bet wins. It's 150 to 5. That's 30 to 1 odds on what could be like a super, super short odds, really, really likely bet. So go take advantage of that. It can be a number of things, anything on an NBA game, from a spread to a money line to a player prop to live same game parlays, all kinds of crazy stuff that you can always find at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thanks for hanging out with me here on Locked On Vikings. Thank you for making it something that is part of your daily routine, your everyday podcast. When you are done here, if you need more Minnesota sports talk, go to Locked On Minnesota Sports and flick on the 24/7 streaming channel, which will feature this show. It will feature Locked On Twins, Wolves, Wild, Locked On Minnesota Sports and all their roundtables, everything. Constant Minnesota sports talk accosting your earballs. That's what you all want, right? So let's move on to the combine. And I want to start with what's happening on the field at the combine, and then we'll move to really what everybody's there for, which is what's happening off the field. But the D linemen / linebackers, which is a blurry line, are starting to do some of the tests. And I'll update you on some of the more surprising results that we got, but also how to think about these, because it's really easy to get too wrapped up in the measurements and the arm length and the weight and the 40 times and all that stuff. And I think to be responsible about the combine, you have to sort of think logically about these things, but it doesn't make it useless data. It's just data I feel like you have to take in a certain way. But if you were unfamiliar, I think the biggest winners in the combine were probably Braden Fisk. Is it Fisk or Fisky? Someone yell at me in the comments. I'm going to say Fisk, and if it's wrong, I don't know, you get to throw a tomato at me. Braden Fisk, big winner at the combine, looked great in the drills, absolutely smashed his athletic testing. There's two guys from Texas, in Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy II, two D tackles that both had interesting days. Tavondre Sweat just gets a lot of eyeballs because he weighed in at 366, which is one of the heaviest players to ever come out in the draft, like ever. And Byron Murphy, who is probably going to be taken higher, also had a pretty good day at the combine. Then there's, of course, Chop Robinson, who everybody kind of understood was going to put on a show at the combine. He did not disappoint. He set a record, and thank you to Marcus Mosher, who does Locked On Cowboys and tracks a lot of this combine stuff with alarming diligence. He pointed out that Chop Robinson had the fastest 10 split ever for a guy over 250 pounds. Just moves like a safety at 250. Absolutely crazy numbers for him. Crazy numbers for Dallas Turner as well, who I think had the best 40 time of the day. Jared Verse, and is it Verse or Verse? I have no idea, but I'm going to go with Verse. He had a fantastic 40 time, if I remember, and then just like a dreadful 3 cone. So you have these interesting kind of days. there are a lot of interesting ways to take in information like that, like a 7.313 cone. For a guy his size is like fine, but you kind of wanted to see more explosion from him. He is actually, I think, a really good example of how to examine the combine, because to me, combine measurements, whether it's arm length or height or weight or athletic testing, they should raise a question, but they can't answer that question. I think that's the best way to put it. So Jared Verse wasn't as agile as we hoped. Did well in the jumps, did well, ran a 4.58 40, pretty good stuff there, good 10 split, but didn't do the agility testing as well. So what question does that raise? What do we think about that? And for me, I guess my answer to that is he explosive or not? And that was the question I kind of went into the combine about Jared Verse, wondering about him is he explosive or not? Because watching him, and I'll do a big Patreon, and I'll go super deep on him someday soonish. But just from the cursory watch that I've seen so far, I don't really like the way he gets off the ball. I don't think it's particularly explosive or quick. And, you need that, right? It's a little bit more careful and thought out. And you can just tell that some guys are coached to think a little bit more, to read before they react. And some guys are just go be game wreckers, right? And I prefer the latter. That's why I'm so high on Chop. But with Verse, or I think UCLA had Latu doing this as well, which I think is just super wrong for him. He feels like a guy that could be so much more of a game wrecker, but they had him playing more cautiously for whatever reason. With Verse, he is getting off the ball. He's not playing hesitantly, but he's not exploding. And so the question is, can he explode? Is it his stance? Is it technique? Can I teach him to be more explosive, or is this just an athletic limitation? And that's kind of the same question that you get with the bad 3-cone, or the, I guess, mediocre 3-cone. But you get a good 10 split. You get a good broad jump. So to me, that tells me, okay, he's done enough to be explosive. Maybe not the most agile guy in the world, but enough to be explosive, but maybe a little stiff. And if he's a little stiff, can he get around the corner on a speed rush? Can he, flash across a gap on a slash, on a run stunt or something like that? That raises those questions. We got to turn to the film to answer them. That's where I'm at on the combine. So I'll keep you updated on interesting stuff that happens. Honestly, D-line is going to be where most of my focus is, because I think that's the position that the Vikings are going to focus the most on, or that they should focus the most on, because they're just so barren there. And also because that's just sort of my personal mission to learn. So we'll focus mostly on that. So big day for the combine, but also a big day for the rumor mill. And we got to give that a little bit of love as well. So that's coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by BetterHelp, therapy online made easy. I feel like you guys are very anxious, like the prevailing emotion. Matt Fries at Zone Coverage wrote a great piece about it. The prevailing emotion of Vikings fandom is anxiety over, oh my, what if they mess up the draft? What if they don't get a quarterback? What if? And some of y'all just need therapy. All right. Just go to therapy. And if you need to get involved in therapy, BetterHelp can help you get set up with somebody who is right for you, who can work within your schedule, who can be flexible, and sort of break down some of those barriers that stop people from getting into therapy. Like, how do I get started? Who do I call? What do I say? And try to maybe make that a little bit more accessible. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, let's move on to the juicy stuff. So I don't have my ear to the ground with the combine or anything like that. I am simply regurgitating what other people have reported and trying to sift through the noise as much as possible. You'll see a lot from aggregated Twitter accounts that is sensationalized or maybe even just straight up false. Don't trust those, okay? Well, I'm going to do my best to try to sift through what is actually real, but maybe the biggest league-wide rumor that went around is that there's a lot of buzz. This is from the Dukes and Bell show. It's an Atlanta sports radio show, but they had a guy named Zach Klein on, who appears to be fairly established beat reporter in the Atlanta space. I don't know, Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons, if you're listening, help me out here. But it seems like he's like a local TV guy in the Atlanta area who said that he's catching a lot of buzz, that the Falcons are really into Kirk Cousins. This is very funny. Last time we checked in on the Combine rumor mill, it was all the buzz was that they're the front runner to land Justin Fields. And I've definitely seen my fair share of rumors that they're super into drafting a young quarterback, and they're all meeting with all the young quarterbacks and looking to trade up. It's very clear that they're getting a quarterback. That's what I'm getting from all of this. But the Falcons seem to have more buzz around what they are doing than more teams. It's just really inconsistent as to what that is, but it feels like you're hearing a lot about the Vikings. You're not hearing a ton about where the Vikings are at. They've been very consistent with their messaging, and it doesn't seem like a lot of stuff has really leaked. But the Falcons are talking to Kirk Cousins. I would guess, trying to kind of read the tea leaves there, the reason that Atlanta media is starting to hear that is because the Falcons and Kirk Cousins are talking. They aren't supposed to, but hey, if everybody does, it's the way it is. It probably just shouldn't be against the rules anymore. Like once the season ends, you should just be able to like talk to people. But allegedly, the Falcons are talking to Mike McCarthy. Alleged, just, it's a joke. I said it's just a joke. I'm saying a joke. But if they're talking, then, that's Kirk Cousins essentially testing free agency. That doesn't mean he's going to leave and test free agency and all the cap ramifications and stuff. This is really the real, hey, let's dip our feet in the water and see what's out there. Right. And I think based on the way that Kevin O'Connell, I think O'Connell literally said in an interview with Mike Florio, yeah, he's earned the right to test free agency, which is like what's happening here. It kind of lets the cat out of the bag because we're not supposed to talk about it. It's not supposed to happen. They're not supposed to, but they are. So, hey, look, when it comes to these rumors, like we'll see. That's always the answer. And I know that's super dissatisfying because we don't get to see, we got to wait 10 more days, everybody. Or March 13th is I think the actual date. March 15th is when a bunch of guarantees and contracts vest and stuff. There's a couple of those, by the way, happening on the Vikings that would have happened the way Alexander Mattison's did if he didn't get cut. I know Garrett Bradbury has one. I think there's another one somewhere. But, with Cousins, we will find out by the start of the league year, which is like in 2 weeks. So we're getting there, everybody. You just got to be patient. But for now, I guess you can just like bite into whatever rumor confirms your priors. It's a healthy way to live, right? That would be a great result, though. Whether it's Fields or Cousins, it would be a very good result to see the Falcons get their quarterback without going to the draft. And if I may opine on the Falcons real quick, I think that works out great for them. Getting a veteran like Kirk Cousins in to, throw to, or to use Kyle Pitts, and Drake London, that's the name I couldn't think of, and Bijan Robinson. Like, they've got so many cool weapons out there. And of course, the whole deal about the Falcons is that, they didn't use those guys because, they had such a superstar in Jonnu Smith who was eating up all the market share. The best player on the Falcons, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith got cut, by the way. So having somebody like Cousins, a self-described point guard, to just let all those skill players do the things that they're supposed to be able to do is pretty cool. Although if I were a Falcons fan, I'd be kind of nervous because why wasn't that happening already? Like, was Desmond Ridder just that bad or whatever? Maybe he was. I don't know. I don't know the Falcons. He did get benched for Taylor Heineke by the time they played the Vikings. So maybe that was the quarterbacks were just holding everybody back. But if you get some serious quarterbacking in there, or you bring in Justin Fields and say, okay, we've got dynamic playmakers all over the place, right? And we're going to kind of lean into this Fields ball, but we have, a line we feel a little better about. We've got more weapons than he ever had in Chicago. Like, that's something you could really easily talk yourself into. I think it works really great for them. But it also works great for us because as Vikings fans, we would love to see the Falcons remove themselves from the QB market. If you really look at, the quarterback teams, the quarterback needy teams, and even the ones below the Vikings that theoretically would have to outbid the Vikings to trade up, which feels very hard to do knowing Kwesi and knowing how aggressive he wants to be about this. But if you count them off as the Bears, the Commanders, the Patriots, the Falcons, the Vikings. There's 5. And then below the Vikings, you add the Raiders, the Broncos, and then I'll say the Bucks and Steelers. I'll add those in. Now, some of those teams have their solutions already baked in, right? The Bucks are probably signing Baker Mayfield back. I would guess that he signs that he signs back, but it's not guaranteed, right? What if he ends up going to the Raiders? Well, now he takes the Raiders out, and now the Bucks are in the conversation. So Baker Mayfield's taken someone off the list. Justin Fields has taken someone off the list, whether that's the Bears because they stick with him, whether that's the Falcons, whether that's the Raiders or whatever. He's taken someone off the list. There was a rumor going around at the combine, or that I saw from Steelers media, that they are maybe going for one more year of Kenny Pickett. So maybe they're out of the market, which is also pretty good for the Vikings, even though the Steelers don't exactly have, I don't think, the juice to trade up past the Vikings or anything like that. They could have been the team that signs Kirk Cousins, right? Hey, Kirk takes one of these teams out of the market. Maybe. If he stays in Minnesota, actually, I don't think that they're out of the QB market. I do think that they still bring in a rookie. But they might not be as serious about trading up. Maybe they do a second round Bo Nix thing or something like that, which would be kind of an interesting Bo Nix in a redshirt year. He's like already old. So maybe Kirk Cousins, goes to New England, but they still draft a quarterback or something like that, right? Like that could still happen. But I do think like he becomes somebody's QB. Like I could see New England targeting that and saying like, all right, we want Kirk. We're going to have a semi-serious QB now. We get to, kind of tread water for a little bit, but now that we've signed Kirk, we get to trade pick 3 back and amass a bunch of first round picks and kind of build while Kirk, bridges us over, right? Definition of a bridge QB and a very quality bridge QB. Kirk is not, he's better than a bridge. I could see that being a really valid strategy for New England. So what we are rooting for as Vikings fans is we want those veteran QBs, the Bakers, the Fieldses, the Kirks, to take somebody out of the market that is a threat to the Vikings' chances to get a QB. Ideal world is, Justin Fields is a Patriot, right? And now they're got their guy and they're not drafting a quarterback, right? Or if Atlanta takes Kirk Cousins, that kind of thing. The teams that are ahead of the Vikings, we really want them out. But it's fantastic if the Steelers just take themselves out of the equation without eating up one of the quarterbacks that we need to, check off teams on the list. That would be super sick. But I should probably wrap this out by reminding everyone it's big time smoke season. It is the time where things fly around like crazy, whether they're verified and whether they're not verified. Every reporter is saying, I heard this, and is giving you the same speech I'm giving you now. Everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. And I think that is a very, very, very vital skill for this time of year. Take every rumor, every report, every headline with a massive grain of salt. Understand that at the end of the day, you have no idea what's going to happen. Most of the teams have no idea what's going to happen. Everybody's having a phone call with everybody, and there are dozens, hundreds of phone calls going around between this team and that team that would make your head spin if they got reported and they don't get reported. It's pretty normal, and we hear about the ones we hear about kind of at random. You're looking at this whole situation through a keyhole. You just have to remember and have respect for that. So next week, we will probably go over, we'll do some free agency cram for exams kind of stuff, maybe talk about whatever happens. I think we're going to start seeing news roll in here, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. Until then, have a great weekend. I will see you all then. And as always, Skull.